Okay, so you sent us this fascinating stack of sources. The topic: earthquakes in Iran. Something that, well, literally moves the earth.
It certainly does.
So today we're doing a deep dive. We want to get into why Iran is just so seismically active, and maybe more importantly, what does that actually mean for the people living there?
Right.
This is really your shortcut to understanding these massive forces and, the human side of it all.
And it's quite the setup geologically. Iran sits in one of the most active seismic zones on the planet.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's right where the Arabian plate is constantly grinding against the Eurasian plate, a really complex collision zone.
So it's like a giant crash happening in slow motion.
Exactly. It makes the whole area a sort of natural laboratory for studying tectonics, and you see a huge range of geological stuff happening there.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. This Arabian plate moving north, hitting Eurasia, that's not just a theory, right? It's physically squeezing the land.
It is. You get significant crustal shortening. The land is literally getting compressed.
And that creates the faults, the earthquake zones.
Precisely. It builds up these incredibly active fault systems, forming major mountain ranges we see, like the Zagros and the Alborz Mountains. They're direct results of this collision.
And the earthquakes themselves, they're not all the same, are they? I noticed the sources mention different types.
That's a really key point. The activity varies a lot. For instance, in the Zagros region, the quakes are almost always shallow.
Shallow meaning?
Meaning they happen close to the surface, typically less than, say, 20 kilometers deep, often from what we call blind faults.
Blind faults.
Yeah, faults that don't actually rupture all the way to the surface. You can't just walk out and see them.
Okay, and then there are deeper ones elsewhere.
Right. If you look over at the Makran Subduction Zone, you can get much deeper earthquakes, sometimes down to maybe 150 kilometers.
So why does that depth matter so much for people on the surface?
Well, that's crucial. Shallow quakes, even if they aren't the absolute biggest on the magnitude scale, can be incredibly destructive.
Because the shaking is closer.
Exactly. The energy is released near the surface, so the ground shaking is much more intense. This causes way more damage, especially, in areas where buildings aren't designed to handle it.
And Iran has felt that destruction many times, hasn't it? The history there is just devastating.
It really is. The numbers are stark. Since 1950 alone, over 172,000 people have died in earthquakes there.
172,000. That's staggering. And some specific events were just catastrophic, right? Like Radbar Manjil.
Oh, absolutely. The 1990 Radbar Manjil quake, that was a magnitude 7.7. Huge event. It killed around 50,000 people.
Just unbelievable. But sometimes it's not just about the magnitude, is it? I'm thinking of the BAM earthquake you highlighted.
Yes, BAM in 2003. That's a really important case study. It was only a magnitude 6.6, smaller than Radbar Manjil.
Smaller, but the impact.
Devastatingly disproportionate, around 30,000 deaths, and it basically wiped out 90% of the city, including its ancient citadel.
Wow. So what made BAM so deadly if the magnitude wasn't the absolute highest?
Well, connecting the dots, BAM really exposed a critical vulnerability. It showed the tragic consequences of widespread use of, frankly, poor quality building materials, things like traditional mud brick or clay construction.
Stuff that just couldn't stand up to the shaking.
Not at all. And it wasn't just old buildings. Even some modern structures, hospitals that were supposed to be earthquake resistant, they collapsed too.
So that points to bigger issues, not just materials, but maybe how things were built, or codes not being followed.
Exactly. It highlighted systemic problems in construction quality and, crucially, the lack of strict enforcement of building codes that did exist. It wasn't just the earthquake's power. It was how prepared or unprepared the built environment was.
Which brings us to today. What about major cities now, like Tehran? The sources seem incredibly worried about Tehran.
They are, and for good reason. Experts are pretty much unanimous. It's not if a major quake will hit Tehran, it's when.
And the longer it waits,
the higher the risk potentially becomes. Some studies predict, truly catastrophic numbers, if a large quake, say magnitude 7.0, were to hit near the city. We're talking potentially over 6 million casualties.
6 million. Why so high?
It's a combination of factors: extremely high population density, several active faults running right near or under the city, and, again, concerns about the structural integrity of many buildings and infrastructure.
So those building codes, like the one mentioned, Standard 2800, they exist, but are they enough?
The code itself is sophisticated, yes. Iran has put effort into developing good standards. The challenge, though, is consistent adherence.
the enforcement problem again.
Right. And things like high inflation, the cost of materials, it can create pressure for contractors to cut corners, maybe use cheaper, less durable materials.
Even with disaster management organizations in place, like the NDMO and the Red Crescent Society.
They're strong organizations, and there's a national disaster management law. But gaps in effective implementation can still exist on the ground. Things like poor urban planning decisions over the years or how resources get allocated can undermine preparedness efforts. It's complex.
It sounds incredibly challenging. Is there anything proactive being done? Any sort of technological hope?
There is one significant development. Tehran is actively working on implementing an early earthquake warning system, an EEWS.
How does that work?
Basically, it uses sensors to detect the initial, faster, less damaging seismic waves, the P waves that arrive before the slower, much more destructive S waves.
So it gives a warning.
Yes. It might only be a few seconds, maybe up to a minute or so, depending on the distance, but that warning time can be absolutely crucial.
What could people do in that short time?
Get under cover, stop trains, shut off gas lines. It could significantly reduce casualties and secondary disasters like fires. It could be a real game changer for public safety, even if it doesn't prevent the quake itself.
So when we pull all this together, this deep dive, it really shows something quite profound, doesn't it? The Earth's power is immense, unpredictable in its timing.
Absolutely.
But human choices, how we build, how we prepare, how seriously we take the codes, those seem to play a massive role in deciding the actual human cost when the shaking starts.
That's the core takeaway. The tectonic stress isn't going away. Future large earthquakes in Iran are unfortunately inevitable. The geology dictates that.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty important question, I think. Well, how does really understanding this interplay, the deep geology combined with the human vulnerability, how does that change how we should think about preparedness? Not just for Iran, but really for any place sitting on an active fault line.
That's the critical question. How does this knowledge transform our approach to living with the power beneath our feet?